This video is to show you some tips for subcutting. So when you're doing a Saturday sampler that's one of my patterns, I estimate the fabric to be pretty close. So I give you a 1/2 inch. If you need a 4 by 8 piece, I give you 4.5 by 8.5. And so I give you a 1/2 inch on either side. So this was the red strip. One other tip is never line up your stuff with the lines on the mat. And if your fabric is red and your mat is red, turn it over so that you can see it easier. So these are all 3.5 inch squares. And so I first trimmed my whole strip to 3.5 inches. And then with a smaller ruler, you come back and you line up one of these lines along your strip and you trim off one little itty bit on the back or the left side. This is for right-handed people. And then when you go to cut, you can line up the ruler 3.5 inch part. You can make sure that this looks nice and straight. I usually line up this, and then I cut. And so if you've got your strip to the right size and you're doing multiples, you just barely trim off a little bit and you trim, 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 trim. Always using the lines on the ruler, not the lines on the mat. If you are a beginner or if you want to learn how to cut properly, turn your mat over so that there's no lines on it and use that, and then you will rely totally on the lines on your rulers. Okay, another tip. I'm going to skip to my yellows. So I've got my yellows all starched and pressed. The reason why you do that is because if you're doing anything that has an angle that's sewn and then cut, or even cut first, the bias, it works so much better if you can have them all straight of grain and they stay better starched. So this is a non-directional fabric. This is a non-directional. I am lining up the top edge and the left edge. I'm not going to worry if this is shorter because it'll be long enough. This one is a little bit directional, and I just wanted to make sure that this is pretty straight. So I'm lining it up. You can see this corner is lined up, but it's that top edge that is my edge I'm watching. This one is the most directional fabric, so I put it on top. And you can see they're not all equal over here. Okay, we are going to cut from this one 4-inch square and one 3.5 inch square. So I'm going to cut it to 4 inches wide because that's my biggest piece. So I'm going to look at my ruler and I'm going to put it on there and I'm going to make sure that 1, 2, 3, 4 inches is going to fit. And then I'm going to line up this piece sort of straight with the print on the fabric, not with the actual fabric. And then you can turn it, and I'm going to cut it to 4 inches wide. Now, if you can, walk around the table instead of moving your fabric, because every time you move it, they move just a little bit and it's harder to adjust. All right, so this now is pretty straight this way, and I'm going to do a 4-inch square. So in order to do that, I remembered that this one is pretty lined up, but not perfect. So I line it up according to the nice 2 straight edges, and I trim off a little bit. And I'm sorry about the glare. I can't figure out how to get good lighting without getting the reflection of this light bulb. So anyway, I apologize. Then I'm going to back this up. I'm going to line up a line across the top edge, a line on the bottom, and there is my perfect 4.5 or 4-inch squares, and they're all the same because I stacked them. Now this edge is square, this edge is square, and this edge is square. So now that I need a 3.5, I wonder if this is less glare if I come back here. Now that I need a 3.5, I'm going to line up that edge, line up that edge, and I I'm going to trim all 4 layers. And so it makes your trimming so much easier. Now, here's some of the white squares. I did the same thing with this pile. So these are going to be, I think, 4-inch. Let me read really quick. Yes, these are going to square up to 4-inch. This one is the only one that looked super directional to me. And so I put it on top, and I'm going to line up that little blue blossom right there. I trim off 2 sides. Oh, I should have done this on a rotating mat. So we'll pretend I did. We'll pretend I just did that. Then you can spin this, and you can line this up. And see why you want to stack them is because I'm not trimming off a whole lot. I probably should have trimmed less on those first 2 sides. Anyway, this is the best method for truing up your sides, and you shouldn't ever have big hunky pieces left over. You want just little slivers left over. And so that is some little tips on subcutting.